This is Before the Lights Gone with Charles, this amazing entrepreneur and also ecosystem spearheader. We have this discussion about how we can get some advice out there on the startup world.
My name is Charles Kinga. Right now, I'm the project lead for Tech Barbecue's Nordic Africa initiative.
What was your main drive when you decided to go building the ecosystem?
I think the biggest and maybe the first drive is the fact that I would pretty much like to break down complexity. When you see the world today, the world before today, the world tomorrow, it's as if we're complicating things a lot more than they're supposed to be. But my realization in my somewhat long life is that wisdom is found in the very simple of places. All we need is to find the right time. So therefore, me doing stuff that has to do with entrepreneurship, what we call startups today, is based on that fact that I can see people doing stuff using too much complexity.
You have a really interesting journey, living in India, coming from Kenya, living here also in the Nordics. What is the mindset around entrepreneurship and the drive of starting something?
Without having to use cliches here, I think that the mindset is really much a startup mindset. And by startup mindset, I mean, there are people who always seem to be capable of starting projects and either accomplishing the projects or not accomplishing the projects, dropping them, but then learning something along the way. And then there are people who never seem to move on with the projects that you hear them talk about or ideas that they have. Now, the funny thing is that we all have ideas. Like I was telling you before, and all these ideas are born equal. So the question is, are you capable of bringing the idea to the place where, the idea could die? Now, a lot of us get scared of that and therefore keep the ideas to themselves or keep talking to their friends about it. And it never works because it's never tried out. And then the opposite are those people who have an idea, go out, try it, either succeed or fail. Now, having said that, it is true that many, many, many ideas actually fail. So if I was to advise somebody who wanted to start a company or a project, is you have to realize that there is a bigger chance of you failing than there is a chance of you succeeding. Having that realization is really, really important. And then the second realization that you need to have is that the world out there is not utopia. It's not coordinated. There are no straight lines. But if you have this realization that you realize it's going to be very chaotic, then you can actually create patterns, even in the chaos.
That's a really powerful thought around finding patterns in chaos. How can they start to see these patterns? What is the toolkit they should have when they start this journey?
Yeah. I think it's important if you as a person have not tried such a thing before. I think it's important to try to create a plan and not necessarily a strategy, because you see, a strategy is something that can always change according to conditions and whatever is happening around you. But a plan is something you can try and stick to. So the first thing is to try and create a plan. What's my plan? And you basically start with the end of the plan and say, this is what I want to create. Let me give you an example, like a musician or, the big stars. When they have booked for a show, they can actually see the show already happening. They can see themselves at that particular scene. They can see actually the outcome before they get there. The same thing with athletes, especially, let's say, those athletes that run your 100 meters. And you see themselves pinpointing the end of the run. And you can see them actually concentrating at the very end of the run. So I think that is something that startups or entrepreneurs can use and say, what do I want to accomplish? What do I want to build? So if you have it in your head, then it's easier for you to go towards that. Then there's a pull effect. It can bring you to that. But if you start by saying, I'm going to want to build something, and then you start analyzing it, you actually find it very difficult to sell it to anyone because it becomes very complex.
Yeah. And you try to figure out every detail that you
Yes. And you see, most people actually are not interested in details. They want a telephone. Let's take that as an example. All they want, can it work? If you start telling them how many pixels and how many megabytes there is in it, a lot of people don't have a clue what you're talking about.
What was a common mistake or something that you realized along the way that, this wasn't right, so I should change that? What was your process of evaluation mistakes?
I think the best process or the best thing that can happen is to get feedback, and not necessarily from your friends, because they try and take care of you. So the feedback is usually very positive. But getting feedback from the people you're trying to bring your products or your service to, and not seeing that feedback as anything negative, but basically turning it around and saying, the feedback I'm getting is actually the data and the facts that I can use, and then tweak your product or tweak your service according to that feedback.
How you filter this feedback? Because sometimes, people might have also their own noise.
Oh, yes.
Filter good feedback from the bad feedback.
If we take the analogy of sound, I think there's, sound, and then there is signal. So you basically, after a while, because you know what it is you're trying to do, when you listen to people, you'll very quickly know, is that just, sound, basically noise, dissonance, or is it a signal? But then being very sharp, having your radars very sharp at finding the signal and being able to follow that. Actually, you realize that you will meet people who are very good at being a signal, who can very quickly tell you what it is they think of a certain product, and give you angles that for you were probably blind spots. You had not seen that.
It's really hard nowadays to listen to signals because there is a lot of sound out there.
Yep.
And this is a nice analogy that if you are having this end in mind, you can recognize the signal from the sound.
Yes.
But then it comes in a more of a motivation phase when you realize, for example, that the feedback is right, and then you are failing in that kind of a approach, or product is not there, or you have a different direction that the market has. How do you find the power of recognizing, okay, I have to start it from scratch, or I have to start almost from scratch?
I mean, I could give you the answer saying motivation, dedication, or working many more hours, but that would be incorrect. From my perspective and from what I've seen, I believe the most important thing is to have discipline. That's number one. And the second most important thing is to give yourself some deadlines, is to say, if this does not work by the time I've spent 2 months trying it, then it's not going to work.
This is a nice journey. You start an idea, and then you get some feedback, and then you get yourself a deadline to keep accountable. But how you measure actual success in the beginning?
Well, that's really difficult for most people, because success is in this world and in our world is seen as something that's, on the very big stage and everyone can see it, and, there's fanfare, etc. I prefer to measure success at every step that is taken towards the goal. The small successes. I think here you could borrow from the Japanese way of life. Just everyday small step that you've taken. Let's say you're training and now you can see just a small improvement. And if you see that as your success, then by the time you reach the huge success, you've disciplined yourself and you're training yourself to accepting that kind of success, but at the same time also to realizing and accepting your failure, not as something to put you down, but as basically a new book from which you can, turn pages and learn. Like, here I failed because I did this. And then therefore that's a lesson.
So in one way or another, you say sometimes the journey in of itself, it's more rewarding than just the final destination.
Oh, yes.
When you reach there.
Oh, yeah.
And then also you said that this is kind of a preparation in the journey. It keeps you also sane when you have success, because probably that's another stage. Then you can get easily lost in a lot of other activities.
Yeah. I mean, I think being in a journey in itself, of course, is a good thing, but I also think it really depends on the person and their personality. That maybe colleagues and other, people that you meet, there are people who do not have the patience to sort of wait and sleep on it and, check it out again tomorrow. Again, let me try and use an analogy. If you try and be like a farmer, you see, a farmer, regardless of what, it's the forces of nature that control, it's the elements that control farming, even with the technology and the machinery we have. So if you put a seed into the ground, then it has a gestation period. And during that time, you really just have to do one thing, and it's called waiting. So understanding that process and actually having joy in the process and anticipation, like, in 2 months' time, then the seeds will germinate and they'll start seeing the plants, etc. But it's very tough. It's very different from person to person, and it's tough on everyone.
How do you manage to find joy in these moments? How do you keep being How do you keep being optimistic about the end result,
Yeah.
even if you see that is not going there?
The optimism here should be linked to you understanding that it's not utopia, it's entropy. Everything else apart from me can be affected. So if that is affected, that I am affected as well. You can, to some extent, control that, but in most situations, you cannot control that. And what you cannot control, please stop using your energy in trying to control.
What is your main objective of the moment? What is your main priority?
If not a tough question, it's a good question. I think what I want to build right now is to create a telescope for the rest of the world to really with data and facts and imagination to be able to see what possibilities there are on the continent of Africa. Not yesterday, but right now, and not going forward, but just like today.
That's really powerful, and it's a noble goal. If you imagine yourself 20 years ago, what would be something you would tell yourself before all these, steps until the present moment?
I should think that the lesson I would have given myself would have been that that money and the creation of money, as in wealth, it cannot be the goal end, and it probably is not the means as well. That there are other ways of creating happiness without money. Of course, it's important to have money, but it doesn't bother me that either it's there or it's not there. And the reason I'm saying this is I can see when I observe both young and older people that it's an obsession that we have in the world. And actually it doesn't quite make sense for me, because if we look a little bit back into history, there was a time where we could barter trade and we were still satisfied. That was good enough.
Your expectations are the biggest thermometer in your happiness, right? If you don't put like expectation money-wise, you will find in other places. What is one advice you would give to anyone who wants to start a business or has an idea but is afraid to start a business?
Bring your idea to that particular market as soon as possible. Ask people, show them what it is you're trying to build as soon as possible, and ask them as soon as possible if, when the product, the service is ready, if they will buy it. And if the answer is no, I would not buy it, then maybe you have a little problem. That's number one. The other thing is give yourself a deadline. Make sure that you have D-Day, the day when you say, no, it's not working. I need to stop, and I need to stop using my energy on this. I have learned so much, and I can turn that lesson around to building something else. You will be so happy by being able to do that.